Have you noticed that you're not reacting the same way anymore? That the things that used to shake you now pass like distant thunder? That some parts of you are no longer at war? No one told you this. There were no fireworks, no applause. No one stopped the world to say, "You're healing." But something in you has begun to shift. You didn't try to force it. You didn't even plan for it. But somehow, quietly, gently, you've begun to return to yourself. The anxiety that once ruled your mornings feels softer now. The voice in your head that used to scream has learned to whisper. The weight you carried? Still there, but it no longer crushes you. You're not falling apart anymore. You're quietly becoming whole again. And here are 13 signs it's already happening. Even if you didn't notice. Wholeness isn't about perfection. It's not about fixing every flaw. It's not about healing every wound so precisely that pain never returns. It's not a grand declaration that, "I've made it." It's quieter than that. Gentler. Almost invisible. Carl Jung once said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. Not by becoming someone new, but by embracing who you already are. Your light, your shadow, the parts you're proud of, and the ones you've tried to hide. Healing, when it's real, doesn't look like transformation from the outside. It looks like softening. It sounds like silence. It feels like finally being able to sit with yourself without judgment. To feel, without trying to fix. To remember, without collapsing. To breathe, without bracing for the next blow. And perhaps, that's what wholeness truly is. A kind of return. A reunion with all the selves you once left behind. Not to glorify the pain, but to bring it home, to remind it that it, too, belongs. Healing doesn't shout. It whispers. It moves like a quiet current beneath the noise of your daily life. Sometimes, you won't even notice it happening. But if you slow down, if you let the noise settle, you might realize that it's already begun inside you. And everything that comes next is simply the unfolding of that truth. You still remember what happened. The details haven't vanished. The pain didn't erase itself. But something's different now. It doesn't control your breath. It doesn't rise like fire every time a memory returns. You no longer feel the urge to explain it to make people understand what you went through. You no longer try to justify your scars like proof of survival. You've stopped bleeding in conversations. You've stopped narrating your past from the place where it still hurts. Now, you can speak of it with clarity, not chaos. With softness, not sorrow. With strength, not resistance. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But now, you've seen it. You've named it. And naming it has freed you. That story, it still shaped you. But it no longer owns you. It's no longer your identity. It's part of your path, not your prison. This isn't forgetting. This isn't denial. This is integration. You no longer define yourself by what broke you. You define yourself by how you kept walking with trembling legs, perhaps, but with relentless presence. And that shift, that quiet, almost invisible shift, is healing in disguise. It's the difference between surviving your story and being free from it. You used to fill every pause. Every silence felt threatening, like something was missing, like you might disappear inside it. So you filled the space. With music. With messages. With conversations that didn't mean. Instead, you breathe. You stay. You allow yourself to be present. And, perhaps for the first time, you're not waiting for something to save you from yourself. You've stopped trying to escape your own presence. And that's not because life suddenly became easier. It's because you've begun to trust what lives inside you. The silence has become a space of restoration, not confrontation. You listen to your breath, and it calms you. You feel the weight of your body and it grounds you. Carl Jung spoke often of the inner world. He said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And you've started looking inward. And instead of chaos, you're finding stillness. This isn't isolation. This is integration. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You've become a place you can return to. A home, not a battlefield. And maybe that's the real shift. Not just the silence itself, but the fact that you've finally made peace with who's sitting there. You don't need every answer anymore. You've stopped searching for final words. You've stopped knocking on doors that closed without warning, waiting for someone to come back and explain why. Some endings never made sense. Some people never said sorry. Some truths never surfaced. And yet you're at peace. Because now you understand. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you give yourself. There was a time when you believed healing required an apology. That peace could only begin when someone else took responsibility. That in order to move on, you had to hear them say it. I was wrong. I hurt you. I didn't mean to. But those words never came. Or if they did, they didn't land where you needed them to. And somehow, you chose to heal anyway. Carl Jung once said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." You accepted the silence. You accepted that the story would never be complete in the way you imagined. Not every thread will tie itself up neatly. Not every ending will offer a clean exit. Some things stay unfinished and still lose their power over you. You stopped rewriting the past to make it feel fair. You stopped waiting for the version of the story where they understood. You stopped needing to know what they were thinking, or if they regret it now. You chose peace over explanation, acceptance over validation. You no longer feel owed. You're no longer reaching backwards for something that might never come. You've made peace with not knowing. And that peace is stronger than closure ever could be. The world didn't change. The chaos didn't disappear. The unanswered questions are still there. But the weight you carried inside shifted. You're no longer dragging your old self through every day. That version of you who fought everything, who felt unsafe in stillness, who carried shame like a second skin. There's less resistance now. Less internal war. Less need to prove. Less need to hide. Because you've stopped arguing with your truth. You no longer fight the feelings that rise inside you. You allow them. You witness them. You breathe through them without trying to control, fix, or erase. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists." And somewhere along the way, you stopped resisting. You stopped running from discomfort and turned to face it. And that changed everything. Now your shoulders feel a little freer. Your breath feels deeper. Your inner space feels quieter, not because life got easier, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. You've stopped measuring your worth by how much you endure. You've stopped punishing yourself for not healing fast enough. You've started choosing softness, not as weakness, but as wisdom. The days are still hard sometimes, but they no longer crush you. Even the grief, even the fear, it all feels softer. Because you're carrying it differently now. Not from survival, but from integration. And that shift, that invisible lightness you feel when nothing external has changed, that is healing. That is you, becoming whole again from the inside out. Before, it hurt. You wanted to explain. You needed to be understood. To be seen clearly. To correct the story others told about you. Because their misunderstanding felt like rejection. It felt like you were invisible, even while standing right in front of them. But now, something's different. You don't argue with false narratives. You don't chase down every distorted perception. You've stopped needing to be translated into someone else's language. You understand now how people see you is their mirror, not your truth. It reflects their beliefs, their wounds, their projections. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But the opposite is also true. What others see in you is often a reflection of themselves. You've stopped trading your peace for the illusion of control. You no longer correct every rumor, fix every perception, explain every choice. Not because you're cold, not because you don't care, but because you value your energy. Because you know that being understood is beautiful, but not necessary for your wholeness. You speak your truth calmly. You act with clarity. And then, you let go. You trust that the right ones will feel you without needing footnotes. You've realized something powerful. Sometimes peace means being misunderstood and loving yourself anyway. This isn't detachment. This isn't withdrawal. This is maturity. You're no longer trying to control how you're seen. You're focused on being who you are. And that quietly, steadily sets you free. You used to say yes when everything in you whispered no. You stretched yourself thin thinking maybe, just maybe, this time, it would be enough. Enough to be loved. Enough to belong. Enough to not be left behind. You confused self-sacrifice with strength. You mistook silence for kindness. You believed that loving others meant abandoning yourself. But something changed. Now, you choose alignment over approval. You don't need to be everything for everyone. You've realized that every time you betray your truth to please someone else, you leave yourself behind. And you're done doing that. You protect your energy. Not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Because your time matters. Because your peace matters. Because you matter. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And part of becoming is learning where you end and someone else begins. It's learning to say no without apology, without guilt, without over-explaining. You've stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that don't honor you. You've stopped saying yes just to avoid discomfort. Because now, your discomfort with dishonoring yourself is greater. Your no is no longer a wound. It's a boundary. And it's complete on its own. You don't need permission to protect yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing your truth. And for the first time, your no feels like a full sentence. A full choice. A full return to who you've always been beneath the guilt, beneath the fear. Whole. There was a time you missed the chaos, the intensity, the drama. It wasn't just emotional, it was addictive. It made your heart race. It gave you something to feel, even if it hurt. Back then, you mistook it for passion, for meaning, for love. But it wasn't aliveness. It was survival. You clung to pain because it was familiar. Because peace felt too quiet, too strange, too foreign. So you returned to what burned you again and again, because the burn felt like home. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of us shaped by suffering, rejection, and fear. And in that shadow, sometimes we build altars to our wounds. We decorate the places where we bled and call them sacred. But now, you see it for what it was. You don't hate it. You don't glorify it. You simply let it go. You stop reaching for the people who kept you in loops. You stop replaying stories that ended long ago. You stop needing the crash just to feel alive. Now, peace feels like truth. Stillness feels like safety. You don't chase chaos anymore because you've remembered. You were never meant to live in a storm. You don't write poems for the pain. You write closure. You write freedom. You write new beginnings with your name at the center. Survival is not your home anymore. You've outgrown it. And now, you're learning to breathe in softness. Without apology, without nostalgia. You're no longer addicted to what wounded you. You're devoted to what heals. Deeper. Your shoulders are softer. You're no longer bracing for the next invisible threat. The tension that once lived in your jaw, your neck, your chest, has begun to dissolve. You've stopped waiting for something bad to happen. You've stopped living on edge. You've stopped believing that comfort means danger. Because now, you've begun to listen to your body. Not as a battlefield, but as a companion. You check in, not out. You breathe with your body, not against it. You no longer try to dominate it, control it, correct it. Carl Jung said, "The body is the shadow of the soul." And now, instead of rejecting that shadow, you're welcoming it home. You no longer punish your body for being tired. You no longer shame it for being in pain. You no longer treat it like a problem to be solved. Instead, you honor it. You thank it. You offer it rest, nourishment, presence. This is not about achieving perfect health. This is not about how your body looks. This is about how your body feels to live inside. Your body is no longer just a vessel you rush through. It's become a place of safety, a place of intuition, a place of return. You eat slower. You move with awareness. You rest without guilt. You exist without tension. That shift may not be visible to others, but to you, it's everything. Because for the first time in a long time, you feel safe in your own body. And that is integration. Before, everything was urgent. A look, a tone, a memory, a misunderstanding. It could all unravel you in seconds. A trigger would set off a storm inside you. Not because you were weak, but because you were raw. Everything felt personal. Everything felt threatening. You didn't pause. You defended. You lashed out or shut down not from intention, but from protection. But now, there's space between the spark and the flame. You pause. You breathe. You observe. You choose. Not out of fear. Not to control. But to stay in truth. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What once was unconscious, your wounds, your reflexes, your stories has now become known. And with that knowing, comes choice. You no longer act just to survive the moment. You respond in a way that reflects your wholeness. Even when anger rises. Even when fear knocks. Even when old patterns whisper your name. You feel the emotion without becoming it. You stay present without losing your center. This isn't about being emotionless. It's about being grounded. You still feel deeply, maybe even more than before. But now you hold space for what arises. You don't let it hijack your being. You're not living in reaction. You're living in response. And that single breath you now take before you speak, that sacred pause, is a sign that you've changed. You used to fix, soften, carry pain that wasn't yours. You stepped into fires that weren't yours to extinguish. Because someone was hurting, and you didn't know how to watch them burn. You made yourself small so others could feel bigger. You held people together while quietly falling apart. You confused love with rescue, and sacrifice with purpose. But now, you let others walk their path. You no longer interrupt someone's lesson just to protect them from discomfort. You know that healing isn't something you can give, it's something they must choose. You've stopped dissolving yourself to hold others together. Because you finally asked, "Who holds me?" Carl Jung taught that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And now you see, accepting yourself also means no longer abandoning yourself to save someone else. You can witness pain without absorbing it. You can care without collapsing. You can love without losing yourself. That doesn't make you cold. That makes you clear. You are no longer responsible for other people's wounds. You offer presence, not repair. Compassion, not codependency. And for the first time, you're giving to others from wholeness, not from emptiness. That isn't selfish. That's sacred self-preservation. That's emotional maturity. That's healing. You're no longer a fixer. You're a mirror. And the reflection you now offer is grounded, whole, and true. A slow morning. Steam rising from a cup of tea. A breeze through the open window. Laughter that doesn't need a punchline. There was a time when none of this felt like enough. You chased intensity. Big moments. Loud emotions. Because stillness felt empty. Because peace felt like nothing. But now, stillness feels like everything. You don't need chaos to feel alive. You don't need drama to know you exist. You don't crave stimulation just to escape your own presence. You find meaning in the pause between moments. You feel joy in the unspoken. You've begun to live in the spaces most people rush past. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart." And now, with that quiet clarity, you see beauty not because the world changed, but because you've changed. The ordinary is no longer boring. It's no longer dull. It's sacred. You see the softness of light at 5 p.m., the texture of silence at dawn, the tiny, miraculous rhythms of your daily life. You're not searching for something more, because this moment is enough. That's not resignation. It's presence. And in presence, everything expands. This is when you know you're healing, because the world didn't need to dazzle you for you to feel grateful. Your inner world became enough. And in that subtle shift, from seeking more to sensing now, you remembered how to feel alive without having to be hurt. You used to be the version of yourself that was most acceptable, the version that fit in, that got approval, that made others comfortable. You smiled when you wanted to disappear. You agreed when you didn't. You wore masks so well, you forgot what your real face looked like. But now, something is shifting. You're becoming the version of yourself that feels most true. Not the safest, not the loudest, but the most honest. You no longer dress for applause. You no longer shapeshift to avoid rejection. You no longer bend your truth just to feel loved. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming means you no longer perform. You're not chasing roles. You're not reciting lines. You're not managing perceptions like a full-time job. You show up in wholeness, not to impress, but to inhabit. You speak slowly. You don't overshare. You don't sell yourself to be seen. You simply arrive fully, softly, as you are. And maybe not everyone resonates with this version of you. That's okay. You're no longer willing to trade your authenticity for belonging. This isn't rebellion. This isn't defiance. It's integration. You stopped performing a life and started living one. You stopped playing a character and started being you. You used to chase validation. Every achievement, every compliment, every connection, a quiet attempt to prove you were enough. You called it ambition, but underneath, it was fear. Fear of being unseen. Fear of not mattering unless you earned it. But now, something's different. You're no longer seeking a seat at tables that require you to shrink. You've stopped trying to impress rooms that never saw you to begin with. You've stopped over-explaining. You've stopped hustling for love. You bring your fullness, your softness, your boundaries, your truth, without shrinking, without translating. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And now, you've done something even more radical. You've accepted your enoughness without permission. You no longer overextend to be liked. You no longer stay quiet just to be tolerated. You don't contort yourself to fit someone else's comfort. And if your wholeness feels too much for some, you let them go without guilt. Because the love that's meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself. You've stopped trying to prove your worth, because you finally remembered you were always enough. And now, you live like it. You walk like it. You breathe like it. That quiet confidence you carry, that calm knowing, isn't pride. It's integration. And it changes everything. No one sees it. No one claps for it. There's no spotlight. No medal. No dramatic before and after. But inside, you're returning home to yourself. You've walked through fire, but it didn't destroy you. It refined you. You shed identities that never belonged to you. You let go of patterns you once called love. You stayed when it would have been easier to run. And now, you're no longer chasing healing like a finish line. You're no longer measuring progress in milestones. You're simply becoming it. In the way you breathe. In the way you walk. In the way you choose softness over performance. In the way you love without losing yourself. You show up differently now. Not to impress. Not to fix. But to be. Maybe the world doesn't notice. Maybe they still see the old you. That's okay. Because you're not healing for show. You're healing for truth. The most powerful transformations are always quiet. They don't demand attention. They don't require validation. They root deep and rise slowly. And when they do, everything changes. Your eyes soften. Your voice steadies. Your presence begins to speak louder than your words ever could. And in that quiet, that stillness you used to fear, you've found something unshakable. You, not a new version. Not a perfected self. Just the one who's always been waiting underneath it all. Whole. Honest. Home. You're becoming whole again. And even if no one else sees it, you know.